evening, peoples. I'm Pastor Leia, and this is, of course, Gingersnap. So welcome back to our living room for our ongoing series on the Ten Commandments in this first week of Pentecost. So it was the first piece of red clothing that I could grab. Yay, Wonder Woman. So we've been going through the Ten Commandments, and we're now in our 7th week. So as you may recall, 1, there is just the one God. 2, there's not other gods, so don't worship false ones, like the ones that have horns. 3, don't say things that God didn't say, because words matter, like a W, M, words matter. Or don't take the Lord's name in vain, as it's usually read. 4, rest on the Sabbath. The thumb is resting. 5 is honor your father and mother, so maybe it's a salute, or maybe it's create a family structure that wants to have all of the fingers stay together because it's a solid family. 6, don't murder, just don't do it. So tonight, 7, don't commit adultery. When 2 people make vows in front of their community, in front of God, that means something. Then we'll get to 8, don't steal or you go to jail. 9, don't lie. And 10, don't covet. This purring creature on my lap over the past week has stolen a candle, and then she stole a lighter, and then she stole an onion. I don't understand her. Anyway, tonight we have you shall not commit adultery from Exodus 2:14. Which is another one-word commandment. So like last week, this is just one word because you can grammatically do that in Hebrew. So it's na'af, you shall not commit adultery. So that's just a little fun fact for you that 3 of the commandments, I think, are just one word. So this is a fun one, especially for me as an old maid. So I'm gonna break it into 2 rants, basically. So the first rant is essentially smash the patriarchy because it needs smashing. So in modern English, dictionary.com defines adultery as voluntary sexual intercourse between a married person and someone other than their lawful spouse. I'm going to add to that definition that adultery is sex with a person other than one's spouse when it is an act of betrayal to that spouse. So bear in mind that in our modern understanding of the word marriage, we are almost always referring to the consensual union of 2 persons. At other points in history or in other parts of the world, that might not be the prevailing definition, but that's what we're going to be working with here, because that is, generally speaking, what we refer to when we use the word marriage. So in the world of Exodus, on the other hand, adultery is one of 3 things. 1, when a man has sex with another man's wife or fiancé. Funny how that leaves open a pretty large loophole for having sex with unmarried women or prostitutes, which was not considered adultery. That's not even me being sarcastic, like, it literally is not adultery in the Bible for a man to have sex with an unmarried woman or a prostitute, so that's neat. However, the second definition is when a woman has sex with literally anyone other than her husband, which totally isn't at all a double standard in the slightest. And that was sarcasm. But the third sense of the word, which I think is actually really neat, is there's a couple places in the Bible when adultery is used as a metaphor for idolatry. So it's kind of like cheating on the Lord with false gods. I think that's pretty cool. I think it came up in, I forget which of the minor prophets it was that we read last summer, but it gets used as a metaphor like that a couple times, which I think is a really solid metaphor. Anyway, so bear in mind also that in the world of Exodus and the Hebrew Bible in general, there is no assumption that a marriage consists of only 2 people. So 2 people is what we mean when we say marriage, but it's definitely not necessarily what the Bible means when the Bible talks about marriage. So as just one example, and there's all sorts of interesting soap operas, honestly, I would just describe them as soap operas, especially in the book of Genesis. So consider the marriage of the biblical patriarch Jacob, who is very, very highly regarded throughout the Bible. We often refer to the God of Jacob, the God of Israel. He's later renamed Israel. He's he's a patriarch. He's a big deal. He's seen as a good guy. So he took Leah as his first wife, my namesake, whose name means weak eyes, because her eyes were weak with weeping, because she was the less pretty sister and the not favorite sister. Cool. But then he also took her sister Rachel as his second and favorite wife. And her name means doe eyes because she was prettier than her sister. So that's a neat way to name your children. And of course, then Jacob also took Leah's servant Zilpah and Rachel's servant Bilhah. And between the 5 of them, one marriage, 5 people, they had 12 sons and at least 1 daughter. So I think it would be entirely reasonable to hold Jacob accountable for the awful way that he treats Leah, and treats 3 of his 4 wives as just commodities. But the Bible does not hold Jacob accountable for that. And the Bible does not regard anything in this marriage as reflecting poorly on him. Anyway, side note, when people insist that biblical marriage can only be between one woman and one man, I literally do not know where they get that from the Bible. Just saying. So, in an ancient marriage, the wife was her husband's property. Before marriage, a woman would be the property of her father or of the family patriarch. So that's neat. So, in Moses' day, adultery is essentially theft. Yeah, because a woman is the property of her husband. So if a man has sex with another man's wife, he is stealing that man's property. How icky does that make you feel? Pretty icky, right? Because I don't like that. I'm glad that we don't necessarily have that understanding today. Anyway, but if we assume marriage today to be a consensual, equal, and legally recognized partnership between 2 people who love each other, which I would hope marriage would be, then do we necessarily see adultery the same way that the ancient world did? Which is an interesting question, and not necessarily one that I have an answer for. I would probably argue that you should still not commit adultery, but maybe not for the same reasons that might have been understood at the time. Because it is a betrayal of your wedding vows, which brings me to my second rant, which is a bit more of a side rant, but it really bugs me a lot when people write their own vows at their wedding, which, I mean, that's fine. You know, you should be involved in that part of your wedding, and you should, mean it and care about the ceremony part, not just the party. I'm just saying. But when those vows are just a mushy declaration of, I love you so much, and ever since blah, 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 and you're the best thing that's ever happened to me, and also you are so pretty, and I love you so much, and did I mention that I love you, blah, 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 blah. Cool. Good for you. Glad you love each other. That's definitely important, and I'm not saying that those declarations of love don't belong in the wedding. They are not vows. That's not what vows are. So, from our Book of Common Worship, this is the more condensed version for special services like weddings and funerals mostly. There's also like a 600-page, probably more than the 600-page version, but this is the one that would be much easier to hold in your hand while doing a baptism or a wedding or a funeral, etc. Anyway, so here is one example of wedding vows from our Book of Common Worship. Let's see. Name, you are my beloved, and I promise, that's the vow part, before God and these witnesses to be loving and faithful to you, in plenty and in want, in joy and in sorrow, in sickness and in health, as long as we both shall live. That's a set of vows. You notice that there's more than just, I love you. It is, because I love you, I promise to be supportive of you throughout our lives together. Another set of vows that I'd like to share, because there's some really gorgeous ones in this Inclusive Marriage Services, a wedding source book. So just another set of vows. I take you, name, to be my partner, to laugh with you in joy, to grieve with you in sorrow, to grow with you in love, serving humankind in peace and hope, as long as we both shall live. I think that's so beautiful. Especially that it kind of brings the community and the world into it, that together our love will bring good things to the world, because more love has never hurt the world, but together our love will grow and help us to love others. So, however, my favorite set of vows, hands down, comes from the Tim Burton movie Corpse Bride, which is not next to me in my DVDs. I think it's in my office because we watched it a couple years ago for a movie night. Anyway, so in that movie, the wedding vows are, with this hand I will lift your sorrows. Your cup will never empty, for I will be your wine. With this candle I will light your way in darkness. With this ring I ask you to be mine. I think it's lovely. So anyway, that's just a bit of a side rant that annoys me in weddings, especially like movie weddings that just, yeah. And I know there are bigger things in the world that should probably annoy me more, but it's just one of those pet peeves, you know? It just, if you're going to use the word vows, there should be like verbs that you promise to commit to in there. I'm just saying. Maybe whatever. Anyway, so, in conclusion, people should be faithful to the thesis statement of their marriage. So that would be the vows. So if your understanding of marriage, I mean, people get married for a lot of very different reasons. I definitely have known people who have gotten married because otherwise they wouldn't have been able to get health insurance, which is a frustrating reflection on the world we live in, but that is why they got married. I know people who have gotten married because that meant that housing became less expensive for them in a school setting, which is maybe not the greatest reason, but a valid reason. Some people get married because otherwise one of them might not be able to stay in the country, and I mean they love each other and want to be together, so in order to get the green card or whatever, they might get married sooner than they would otherwise. Some people get married because all of their friends are getting married and they're feeling very left out. Some people might get married because it helps them have a better public image. Some people just really want the big party or see marriage as a life ritual that comes when you reach a certain age. You graduate from college, you get a good job, you get married, like that's how you think things are supposed to progress, which, I mean, okay. I mean, hopefully, you still have a supportive partner in the scheme of things. Historically, maybe marriages have been more of a business deal kind of thing, in exchange of goats. No one has ever offered me as many goats as I believe that I am worth, and this is why I am not married. Actually, no one's ever offered me any goats, which is just so insulting, I think I'm worth a lot of goats. Or maybe in like royal marriages as kind of a peace treaty kind of thing. There have been a lot of different reasons why people have gotten married over the years. And so you should be aware of why you're married and be faithful to that. I would hope in all of these cases that there would be an underlying theme of wanting to support each other and be there for each other and help each other through things. But, I mean, I've never been married, so what do I know? Anyway, so the thesis statement, what the vows are, might not be the same for all people. So I do think it's interesting how explicit this commandment is. You shall not commit adultery. Like, there's some interesting historical aspects to that of how the verb is understood, but it's not really that vague, But this commandment doesn't tend to be the one that's the moral litmus test for people. I am just saying there have been a lot of public figures, even public religious figures, who have committed adultery, and like that hasn't ended their careers. And I mean, not all people sin. I just think it's a little bit weird that people get very, very hung up on certain sins, but somehow not this one. I don't know. separate issue. Anyway, hashtag just saying. So as Jesus says, all of the commandments come down to two things. One, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. And the second, love your neighbor as yourself. So we might ask the question, how does this commandment, thou shalt not commit adultery, bring us into a better understanding of how to love God and how to love our neighbors? And it's kind of an interesting one, because don't commit adultery is, generally speaking, about your love to one person. But if you, oh, hello, and, well, I lost my train of thought. But if you're loving your spouse, who is a neighbor, I suppose, as yourself, and you are respecting them and being faithful to them and valuing them as a person, and I would like to think that if you're living in a committed, respectful, loving partnership, then that would give you the support and positive whatever to share more love with the world. Because again, more love never hurts anybody. And maybe we should, like, I don't know, not be jerks to each other, which maybe could just be the super condensed version of the 10 Commandments. Don't be a jerk. I don't know. Anyway, so, yeah, there's another commandment that's not at all weird for me personally to talk about. So we will be back next week with commandment number 8, don't steal, which this one is very, very bad with. Yeah. Why did you steal that onion, you tiny weirdo? What did you think you were going to do with an onion? She's purring. Of course she is. She feels no shame. Anyway, so peoples, good night until I see you again.